On a gloomy afternoon, a man named Dahmez went on a trip with his friend to an amazing place that Dahmez always wanted to go to, and everything was going smoothly until Dahmez and his friend needed to go. And so both Dahmez and his friend talked to each other for a bit about how their trip went and how much they enjoyed this trip together. And Dahmez's friend would tell Dahmez to stay here because he was going to go to his car and get something, and when he comes back he'll take him to the car with him. And so his friend went to the car, did his thing, and then as soon as he came back, he was shocked on what he found. The story that I'm about to tell you today is from the infamous book The Missing 411. And well, if you like true crime, then you'll know the author of this book, David Paulides. And a quick summary on what David does: he just investigates into cases, and he talks about what he finds and what he thinks about these cases in his book. And so if you haven't heard of David Paulides, then I'd suggest you pick up his book. And a quick side note, at the end of the video there's all the conspiracies, and I'd highly suggest you listen to all of them and comment below which one's the most likely outcome. But before we begin, if you enjoy true crime stories or just scary stories in general, then I highly suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as that's all I do and I upload once a week. And also a massive shout out to all 360 subscribers who've been growing at a rapid pace, and I can't thank you enough. But with all that being said, let's begin. Dr. Dahmez is a man who was born on June 24th, 1896 in an area called Blue Rapids, which was located in Kansas. Dahmez was very intelligent and went to many different prestigious schools, such as Hastings College, and then he moved from Hastings College to another college in Nebraska called the Denver Bible College, which then he received a PhD from the Theological Seminary, which again was located in Nebraska. And for a while, everything in his life would be amazing. He would marry the love of his life, Lucia, on June 1st, 1930, and he would go on to be an amazing editor of the Grace Truth magazine. But the main thing that Dahmez had an interest to was gems and minerals, and his interest was so strong into minerals that he joined the American Federation of the Mineral Society, and he joined other different gem clubs to satisfy his needs, which really shows you that he has a massive passion for gems. And he would spend hours on researching of different gems that people have found and how these gems were used in different types of situations. And he would do this for a while until he decided that he wanted to go outside and find these gems for himself, which of course he would begin to do. And for many years he would do this by himself. He would go out to these different locations by himself and just mine for gems. Sometimes he would go to the cliffs, or sometimes he would go down into abandoned mines, and he would just stand in front of a wall and just began to mine it until he found a gem or found something that interested him. And well, he would continue to do this almost like a tradition until unfortunately he would be diagnosed with arthritis, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a condition that just causes pain in your joints and basically just hinders someone's ability just to do normal things in life. And well, for a lot of people that are diagnosed with arthritis, they would just tone back on the activities that they do. But of course not for Dame though. He would continue to mine even though he would be in excruciating pain. But even though he could just stand there and mine, the only thing that was really hurting him was the actual walk into the place. So he asked his friend David McSherry if he could come and assist him to the destinations that he needed to go. And David said, yes, I'd love to help you. And the two of them would go rock hunting, as that's what they called it. And to give you more detail on where they went rock hunting, majority of the time they would go to this place called the Pike National Forest. The forest was located in the Front Ranges of Colorado, and to be even more specific, the west of Colorado. And a fun fact, the place was actually named after an American explorer called Zebulon Pike. And the Pike Forest was just a massive forest, and surrounding the forest would just be massive mountains made out of bedrock and granite. This place also has a nickname. When you go to the tops of a specific cliff, there's one cliff that looks like a devil's horn, which gives it the nickname the Devil's Head. And just overall, these cliffs just give you an amazing view, and most people would use these cliffs as like a trail or to go hiking on, but not Dame. He would use these places as his rock hunting area, as the place was filled with different types of rocks and gems. Now the day is April 29th, 1981. Dame wanted to go rock hunting, so he called up his friend David and asked him, hey, let's go rock hunting. And of course David would agree, and so David would plan to pick up Dame. And when David picked up Dame, he noticed that Dame wasn't wearing his usual attire. He was wearing a white baseball cap and a maroon shirt with brown ankle socks and work boots, which besides for the boots, David had never seen Dame wear any of these type of clothes, because it wasn't something that you that you'd wear when you go digging. But either way, Dame and David went to the usual digging spot where they would be there for the day. And the digging spot was next to this road called Rimpard Range Road. And to give you a better understanding of what this road looks like, it's just a massive road heading towards one of the biggest mountains. And it's about 38 miles of just unpaved road. And so once the two got to the area that they were digging in, they separated not too far, about 40 feet from each other, and they just began to mine. And they would continue to mine for about a couple of hours until David was just exhausted from mining for so long. And he would get up from his little hole that he made and he would peek his head over and would ask Dame that, "Are you finished for the day?" And Dame was a hard worker and a very rugged man, and he knew that he could go on for even longer. He also knew that David probably wanted to go home and he needed David to move around. So he just told David that, "Give me 20 more minutes." So David looked at his watch and the watch said 3 p.m. And so he said, "Okay, that's fine." And he told him that, "I'm just going to head to the car. And if I'm not back before you're done, just start slowly heading towards my car. And I'll meet you halfway there and I'll take you the rest there." And about the halfway mark was like this little hill that Dame could never get over by himself. Again, because due to his conditions. And so Dame agreed, and David collected all of his rocks, tools, and began to head towards the car. And once he got back to the car, which really wasn't far from the site, he began to clean his tools. And after about 10 minutes of cleaning, and David saw that his tools were squeaky clean, he decided that he needed to go check up on Dame to see what he's doing. So he dropped his tools and began to walk back to the site. And as the dig site slowly came into view, David saw that Dame's tools were on the floor. And that was usual for Dame because he would just drop his tools on the floor and pick them up later. So David, in a confused state, he would just go closer and closer to Dame's dig site until he noticed that Dame's not there at all. And so David began to look around and there was just no sign of Dame. It was almost like someone just picked him up and just ran away. And by the way, this was a span of 15 minutes. So when Dame picked up his tools and went back to the car and cleaned them and went back was about 15 minutes. And Dame did say that he would be around about 20 minutes. So looking around, David just thought that maybe Dame's already went ahead. And even though David was like, that can't really be possible because Dame would find it extremely hard to get up that little hill. But David managed to convince himself that maybe he just did it. So he ran back to his car, and just like how it was before, there was no sign of Dame. And now David, from a confused state, went to a panic state and began to honk his horn to try to alert Dame that, "Hey, my car's here." And for 10 minutes David would constantly honk on his horn and would wait for Dame to show up, but again he didn't. And at this point David knew whatever's happened to Dame isn't good and he needed to call for help. And so David stood in the middle of Rampant Road and waited for any passerbys to come. And about 2-3 minutes later, a motorist would come by and David would flag him down. And he would explain to the motorist that, "Hey, my friend's missing. Can you call the police?" And the motorist would sympathize with David and would turn around and go call the police. Because again, remember, this is the early 1900s and cell phones weren't a thing. And around 11 p.m, the police were notified and a full-scale search would commence. And for 5 days straight, they would search this massive area and find nothing. And they would go to the extent of bringing out sniffing dogs, and even they couldn't pick up Dame's scent. And just like that, the search would die down and everyone's hopes would just slowly die down. On July 18th, 1981, so a couple of months later, Dame's wife wrote to an attorney named Richard Long, and she would tell him that, "Can you help me find my husband? Because I just don't think that he would just randomly disappear." And she would say that she speculates that foul play was involved. And so Richard would write back and would say, "Yes, it is strange on how Dame would just randomly disappear, and we should probably look further into this." And well, the two would extensively search the area along with other people as well. And while they wouldn't find anything, and Dame would be officially declared dead in 1990 after being missing for a whole 9 years. During the search for Dame, there was no sign of Dame struggling. They found no blood, and they also asked David if he heard any cries, which then he would reply to, "No, I didn't," which suggests that he wasn't abducted or he wasn't killed by an animal. And the fact that his tools went missing as well was truly strange. Maybe he decided to wander off or relieve himself and got lost in the process, or maybe he just let himself free into nature. And of course, given the medical history of Dame, he couldn't really got too far due to the rugged terrain. He could have easily got stuck somewhere or potentially unalived himself. Some people say he decided to wander off to find a better dig site and unfortunately got stuck and died. Or knowing that he was at the end of his life, he just decided to walk into the forest and live his final moments in there. Another theory is Dame was never in the area and the whole story was fabricated by David to cover up a murder or assistant unalived, which could make sense due to, no one randomly just disappears like that. And what David was saying can make sense, but doesn't at the same time, if that makes sense. And so personally, I think that David did do something. There's not really a lot of reasoning why David would murder Dame. There's no financial reason, and even though Dame had a lot of gems, they weren't really worth much. So I don't know why David would do it. David could have an agenda against Dame. I don't know, but maybe Dame done something to David in the past, which ultimately made David to go kill him. But either way, this case is still unsolved, and no one knows or will ever know what happened to Dame. So that'll be it for today's video. If you enjoy true crime stories or just scary stories in general, then I highly suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as that's all I do. I upload once a week. And again, a massive shout out to all 360 subscribers. We've been growing at a rapid pace and I just can't express how thankful I am. And hopefully I can make this into a full-time thing. But with all that being said, thank you for watching. And yeah, goodbye.